But we're back. You already know me. You know Stefan. So I'll go ahead and let Nick introduce himself, and then we'll dive right into NFT and crypto for loyalty in payments.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Corey. And yeah, my name's Nick Hill. You haven't met me yet, but yeah, I'm a director of a company called nChain, and we're actually sponsoring this NEXT track. Personally, I've been involved in the online gambling space for 20 plus years, and I got involved in crypto back in around about sort of 2017. But I realised that there was another side to crypto, and that being blockchain. And so we now use blockchain, or I try to avert from using the terminology blockchain and revert to it as distributed ledger technology, because when anybody says blockchain, they always go, crypto. And no, there is this other side, which is distributed ledger, which is a utility application. And we use that for good, for benefit, for loyalty, for promotion, for all sorts of things, which is what we will be discussing this afternoon.
Well, I think that actually opens us up to a good starting point, which is really about redefining of the industry, of the technology. You know, how do we go from, and we've talked quite a bit today when we've discussed NFTs, we've talked obviously about the obvious ones, you know, Bored Ape and these JPEGs and millions of dollars transacting. So why don't we look first at redefining that in terms of the technological application as we understand it, which will allow us to sort of get into the loyalty discussion. So, so Nick, why don't you just continue off there on the the technology side?
Okay, so it's a broad topic, because in my world, an NFT is just a token. It's tokenization. It's the ability to transact. It's the ability to be able to do all sorts of things with regards to communicating with an individual, communicating with a community. When you look at sort of like the Bored Apes or the coin value of an NFT, that's where things start to go wrong to a certain degree. I don't know, Stefan will probably agree with me here, but the actual NFT is fundamentally a token. It's the ability to be able to transact. So where we use this for loyalty and for reward is when we start to create a wallet. We create a wallet on our mobile device. The mobile device, we then have some form of KYC that we plug into the mobile device, which allows us to transact our fiat currency into the wallet that we can create into a stable token. That then enables us to transact with our wallet. So we can then start to use the wallet, or anything that is within the wallet, we can start to reward the player, in this instance, or the customer, with some form of token, some form of NFT. And that could be anything. It could be a nano payment, a micro payment, a Bitcoin, a Bored Ape, something that gives you some loyalty or reward for being a loyal customer, a loyal player.
Well, so building off of that, Stefan, if you could talk a bit more, because we've talked quite a bit about KYC and the expansion of its capabilities as it relates to blockchain, as it relates to this single wallet. So why don't you talk a bit more about what the benefits are when it comes to the KYC component when we start using a technology like this?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a misnomer that you can't do KYC on wallets. You absolutely can. And that hasn't been the predominant use case, right? But I think we're seeing that change, and we're beginning to see that change quite quickly. For instance, I work with a company called Fantium, which is an athlete investment program. So you can invest in, we're focusing in on tennis players initially, very difficult sport to fund yourself, and fans can then fund that player and receive royalties in terms of their winnings over the season or longer, including actually their commercial endorsements. Now that is a security, it's registered as a security. There's full KYC that's done to participate. There's a prospectus that is issued in advance. So A, I think it's a complete myth that you can't KYC, and then B, I think actually there are, quite significant advantages in terms of, you can use, as Nick says, a wallet to prove that you've been KYC'd, right? You can use a token that sits and is not transferable in your wallet. You can use a token to identify somebody who wants timeouts or problem gambling, and that can be used across multiple operators.
Absolutely.
And I know, Nick, you've got a lot of experience in this.
I was going to ask Nick to expand on that, talking about player protections in particular, how the benefits are expanded there.
There you go. Stefan, you've really touched on it there, because you can use certain attributes of blockchain technology to anonymize or use pseudonymity to anonymize certain attributes of a player's history. So if I was to go to Casino A, and I'm bored with Casino A and I want to go to Casino B, and I've triggered certain what we call markers of harm, where I've set myself a deposit limit, I've set myself certain timeouts that I can walk away from the machine after 2 hours, whatever it may be. I've got sort of almost like a passport that I take to Casino B. So I go through the registration process at Casino B, but I don't have to go, I need to set that deposit limit, I need to do this, I need to do this. It already comes with me, and the casino that I've gone to, or the sportsbook I've gone to, has to respect what I've brought along with me, and that is the power of blockchain and being able to use what we call pseudonymity and anonymization of certain attributes of a player's data.
Well, so let me ask this then. One of the things that you mentioned is bringing this from one operator to another, having a central wallet that you're able to, that's effectively yours, that goes from property to property. So with that in mind, and knowing let's say the protective nature of the brick and mortar casino world, is this something that you see as being widely adopted? Is it something that you see as having a significant hurdle in getting adoption? And then, in addition, and we'll talk more about the geographical component, but how would this necessarily work in a brick and mortar environment, going from one geographical location to another?
Yeah, there's a big question. The technology exists. It is available. It's available today. But will the casino property, the brick and mortar casino, want you going from the Venetian into the Wynn? And they've spent a lot of marketing dollars to keep you in the Venetian, and they certainly don't want you. That comes down to regulation, and that's where the regulator has to then stipulate that this is what we want to see from the player. So is the market ready for this? Well, there's the million-dollar question. We don't know. Online, it's slightly different, because the regulators are starting to call for this, and it's called single player view. And in the UK, as Stefan knows, and Corey, you probably know, there's a big push for operators to start sharing data. But every operator is very parochial and very protective of their players, because they've spent a lot of money acquiring those players, and they want to retain those players. But the regulator's saying we need to know that that player has the money, we've done the necessary source of funds and the affordability checks, and that if he goes from casino A, B, C to D, that he is being protected in that environment. And that's where this big C word comes out, called collaboration. And in the online space, the operators have to collaborate and share data. The technology does exist today that they can anonymize certain attributes of that data. You go through the traditional registration processes, but your health passport, your gambling passport, whatever you want to call it, travels with you, and that maintains that anonymity.
And I think it certainly has the potential, right? There's no question about it. And it's not just within gambling, it's passports, it's health, it's all sorts of different areas. But again, I think it's education. There's a big education piece. I think technology still needs to kind of improve. And when I say education, I mean education both at kind of consumer level and at a regulator level and the companies involved. And yeah, I suspect we're still a little way away from that.
Well, and I think one other major area that deserves to be noted. One of the common threads throughout all of the discussions that we've had today, especially when it comes to Web3, crypto, this blockchain, this entire space, has been the question of regulators, has been the question of jurisdictions, has been the question of who's in charge and who's the oversight body that's going to say yes or no to anything that's happening. And so I think one question here is that the transferability of this information from one region to the next, the ability for it to be sort of to exist everywhere, brings up the question of, can a single wallet exist in a geographically centralized regulatory body? So can you have the same single wallet for the US as you would have for the UK, as you would have for the Netherlands, or you would have for the Philippines? And how do you overcome that in a space where each geographical body is going to have jurisdiction?
But isn't that the same as a credit card? I mean, you've got a credit card and you can use that, frankly, wherever I want to use it, right? But there's different potential, depending on what I'm doing with it, regulation around that. I don't know if I necessarily see the...
It's a big question, going across the country. I can see it within the US and maybe...
Well, this is more from a regulatory standpoint, right? Because obviously the technology itself can move flawlessly from one jurisdiction to the next. But as far as how the regulatory bodies adapt to it, can the single wallet exist in this sort of universal context, or does it have to be jurisdiction by jurisdiction?
In my personal opinion, yes, because if you take away the distributed ledger technology from coin, from crypto, yes, because it is just it's an accountancy, it's double entry accountancy. And so if you go away from minting coin to just using distributed ledger technology for what it's designed and intended for originally, yes, it can.
So if we take the casino out of the crypto casino side of things and just take the crypto out of the crypto casino, just focus on the actual player data.
Focus on the player data. Focus on what the player's doing. Focus on the individual rather than the monetary value, because there's this big buzzword in the industry at the moment, which is cashless casino.
Sure.
It's about how do we take a land-based casino and make it cashless. Now, that comes into tokenization, it comes into cryptocurrency, and where people get really stuck is they go, oh, I've got to mint coin. I've got to have my own currency, whether it be Caesar coin, Win coin, whatever it is. I've got to have a currency. No, you don't have to have a currency. All it is a double entry accounting practice. So you're not actually minting any coin. All you're doing is you're doing accountant's practice. And so you have a custodian bank where you deposit your fiat currency, and this is like the panel earlier, the chap earlier, Raoul was saying, you have to have fiat coming into the community. Right. There has to be fiat, and there has to be rules, and there has to be regulations. This is where it comes back to. You've got to KYC your player. Once you can KYC your player, you can start to protect the player, because you can put your AML, your affordability checks, your source of funds, all within that same wallet. Okay, but you're not actually creating any crypto.
Right.
You're just creating an accountancy, credit, debit into the wallet.
Stefan?
Well, I'd agree with Nick. I mean, I think to your point around wallets, again, I go back to kind of CBDCs. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what governments do.
Sure.
They're not going to be creating wallets.
No.
At least I hope not. And I know they're talking to wallet providers. So how does that work? Is that...
So, well, in that case, then, if you are starting to see some glimmers of hope, I'm wondering what currently would you say then is is the biggest hurdle? You know, Nick, you mentioned collaboration. There's also, you know, Stefan, you mentioned education. What would you say would be the biggest hurdle today as far as seeing some of this? Because like you said, if the technology exists, the benefits are clear. What's stopping this from being something that we at the very least start to adopt on a much grander scale? So Stefan, we'll start with you.
Well, I guess it depends what we're talking about. If we're talking about the kind of marketing side, I'd say nothing, frankly. You know, I think there's plenty of things that operators can be doing from a marketing perspective that has no regulatory concern. That actually, you know, again, if you're trying to target a new audience, you're trying to target a younger audience, loyalty. I mean, look at Starbucks with their Odyssey program, etc. Loyalty is key within the casino world. So why not start looking at deploying, you know, NFT-based loyalty programs, for instance? Equally, you know, communities, building communities around shared ownership and, you know, assets is, you know, if you look at kind of Web3 communities, they are far more gelled than pretty much any community I know of because of this idea of kind of co-creation and co-ownership. Again, I think there's no reason why, particularly, you know, sports books and the passion that fans have for sport,
For their teams,
there can't be things being created around that. So I think in that respect, there's nothing stopping, you know, innovative operators beginning to explore. And not just explore for the sake of it, but explore with very clear kind of KPIs and objectives in mind. I think on the payment side, it's more complicated. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, I think it is, frankly, the single biggest use case for gambling, but not in regulated markets. Will that change? I think it has to with CBDCs, potentially with crypto moving forward. But that then is a regulatory question.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying, you know, with the teams that you're working with. You know, it is about building community. We have to move away from the payment side because as soon as you start to mention money, payments, crypto, that's where the regulators, you know, start to, oh no, you can't do that because they associate it with the bad actors and, you know, what's gone on within the industry. We have to break it down and bring it back to what does the technology actually do and what does it do for good. And that is, it encourages operators and players to be more transparent, accountable, and auditable. That is what the technology does.
And so I guess with just a minute left here with closing mark, I'm curious to know just both of you, what do you see as, or how far down the road do you see before we have full adoption of not just the single wallet or the cashless, but actually having fully functional, regulated crypto casinos in the market? Or do you see it as something that has an opportunity in a regulated space?
Well, I will take that back to when will we start using blockchain, or when will we all start using blockchain without actually even knowing that we're using it? I reckon that's going to be probably about 3 to 5 years.
Or to your point earlier, without the crypto component.
Yes.
So I think there's so many different use cases that could be deployed, and I don't think all of that will necessarily wash its own face from a commercial point of view. Certain things will push through more effectively than others, but then I think it's a regulatory question.
Well, gentlemen, and everybody who stuck it out.
Stuck it out. Is everybody
The
out
few
there?
of you.
Luckily, the lights are bright, but thank you all for sticking it out, for joining us today, and thank you both for closing out the panel.
Thank you,
Thanks
Corey.
a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.